Namaste and welcome to the Bharatvaarta Weekly. Thank you so much for joining us on this lovely Sunday morning. I'm Roshan Karyappa. I have with me Abhishek Paul and Neerav Kanodra to take you through the news and events of the week that was. It's been a very eventful week. India has exported missiles to Armenia. That's the first of its kind. Then we have the Indian National Congress president nominations heating up. We have Mr. Mallikarjun Kharge and Shashi Tharoor filing nomination. Also on the geopolitical front, Putin annexed parts of Ukraine, and also, his speech was fairly interesting, where he referenced multiple things like the 1857 revolution, of all things, right? In similar vein, India also abstained on the UNSC resolution condemning Russia. And closer home, we had the launch of the 5G services. And also some good news on the Indian economy front as well. So we're going to cover a bit of an update on that. All of this and more on this week's Bharatvaarta Weekly. Again, if you haven't already subscribed to us, do subscribe to us so you can get your content on a regular basis. Also, rate and review us on all the podcast platforms that you listen to. It'll help more people discover our content. All right. As always, let's begin with the episode that we put out last week. This was a part of the Velina's Talk series. It was with Trin Nguyen, who is a Southeast Asia and Southeast Asia policy analyst, actually. She's based in Vietnam, I think. Neerav, did you catch the episode? What are you looking forward to?
So I am looking forward to it. I follow Trin on Twitter, and she's very insightful on the whole. One is the Southeast Asian economies and all of East Asian economies, and second thing is about the balancing role between Southeast Asia prospered a lot when US and China trade was very high, right? And they were all kind of involved in the China supply chain and all of that. And now they're kind of in a tough situation, either having to choose between the two, or how do you delicately balance between the two. So while I haven't caught the episode yet, but it should be very insightful. And this is like a fantastic thing, kind of like the Vishwavarta, where on the Bharatvaarta platform, we're talking about rest of the world as well. So that should be a very interesting episode. So hopefully catch it soon.
Yeah. Likewise, I just got back from travel and I'm yet to catch up on a few of these episodes. I've followed Trin for a while as well, and I like the focus on geoeconomics, right? She tweets out a lot of hard numbers and really very good content, very good person to follow on Twitter as well. Do check her out. All right, moving on to the first piece of news. India has exported missiles to Armenia in a significant move to boost India's defense exports. The country has signed an export order for missiles, rockets, and ammunition to Armenia. These exports will help the Asian nation in its border conflict with Azerbaijan. Although the value has not been made public, the estimates say the equipment is worth around 2,000 crore rupees. The order includes the first ever export of the indigenous Pinaka multi-barrel rocket launchers, along with the anti-tank rockets, ammunition, and more. This deal adds to the target of rupees 35,000 crore worth of equipment to be sold abroad by 2025. Neerav, this is very promising stuff, right, on the defense exports front?
Yeah, so see, basically what this is India was the second largest importer of defense equipment after Saudi Arabia, I think. And now what has happened is there's a renewed focus. So one is, step one was indigenization, that whatever you're importing, can you make it at home, make in India, make for India. But also, India has this opportunity because of its large scale and its large defense budget that we can sell, especially to the global south, right? You have talks of earlier BrahMos missiles being sold to Vietnam. Now this is Armenia. As you mentioned, Armenia recently had a conflict with Azerbaijan, the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, right? I hope I'm pronouncing it Karabakh, Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. And there, Azerbaijan took over some disputed territory with a lot of help of drones and a lot of Turkish military equipment, right? Both Armenia and Azerbaijan are ex-Soviet countries, were getting most of their arms from Russia. This is an opportunity. See, you've got from the earlier pre-Cold, in the Cold War era, you either bought arms from USSR or you bought arms from the US. And a lot of these are like A, like quite expensive, B, you are at their mercy. So India can be like another player in this. China obviously is one. You have France, which has a very big defense industry. You have Israel, but now India gets in as well. And these are countries which would want a neutral, non-aligned person who won't hold them to ransom at the last minute, where if you need spare parts. Or in case of a conflict with Azerbaijan, India may not want to, may not take like sides. So I think this is a good thing. Second thing is, this is also validation of our military equipment, that it is of a global standard. It is at a very competitive price, and this allows economy of scope and economy of scale for better domestic manufacturing, indigenization of technology, right? So I think on multiple fronts, it's a very positive news. It also kind of elevates India's standing as like a country which other nations look up to. See, in terms of economy, we might be the fifth biggest, but per capita, we are still a poor country. But we do have enough complexity in our economy that we should be pulling our weight this way with geopolitics. I think this is one of the ways, not just to like make revenue out of it, but also build allies across the global south, right? So, which probably helps India in its own conflicts versus India's neighbors, etc. So, it's a positive news through and through. And hopefully, as in, these have been sadly very small steps, but we work towards kind of getting to the level where, as you mentioned, right, 35,000 crore of defense exports by 2025. It's still a tough target, but hopefully these are the steps in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the signaling power of something like this cannot be underestimated, right? I mean, from the first time, I mean, from being very import focused, we're actually looking at it, from an export perspective, which is really huge, I think. And 2,000 crores out of the 35,000 may seem like a tiny amount, but then it's definitely a step in the right direction. And we hope that we'll see more of this in the days and months to come, right? Well, in some political news, Mr. Mallikarjun Kharge and Mr. Shashi Tharoor have filed nomination for the Indian National Congress president position. Earlier, Mr. Kharge, Mr. Tharoor, and K.N. Tripathi had earlier applied for nomination for the party president. However, Mr. Tripathi application was rejected. So Mr. Tharoor and Kharge will now face off in Congress's presidential polls. October 8th is the date for withdrawal of candidacy. If no one withdraws, then the voting process will take place. Abhishek, this is pretty interesting. Do you see like a new sort of a power dynamic in the Congress now?
Yeah, so this whole INC presidential polls situation has been very interesting over the past couple of weeks and has sort of taken away the headlines and spotlight away from Rahul Gandhi's Bharat Jodo Yatra that he is currently ongoing right now in the southern states. So initially, the big news topic out of this was the happenings in Rajasthan, right, where Ashok Gehlot was initially supposed to be one of the people who is going to contest this election. Now, Ashok Gehlot had assumed that he would be allowed to continue as the CM of Rajasthan as well as, be Congress president if he won. But it seems the Gandhi family quickly shot down that idea in the sense by making it clear that the one person, one post rule will be applicable for this post as well. So then what happened is we saw some dramatic events where a lot of the MLAs were resigning or threatening to resign who were Gehlot supporters, right? And then essentially the idea or the fear for them was that they thought that this is basically a way in which Ashok Gehlot is being pushed out of the state and Sachin Pilot would basically become the CM, which Ashok Gehlot and his supporters wanted to really avoid, right? So what happened is ultimately Ashok Gehlot stepped out of the INC president's race, right? Congress president's race. And but it kind of totally exposed the fissures in the Rajasthan State Congress, right? And the general problem with the high command versus a strong state leader. So that was one part. Mr. Tharoor, of course, has been quite vocal in wanting to contest this election, and he's primarily been the one who has been highlighted in the media. There was a blitz of interviews the other day, right, with all top news channels interviewing him, I think on Thursday. At that time, it was Mr. Digvijay Singh who was supposed to be the one, going against Shashi Tharoor. They even had a photo op saying this is going to be a friendly contest and so on. And one of the things Shashi Tharoor has been saying in all his media interviews is that, he has spoken with all the three Gandhis, right? Like Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi, and Priyanka Gandhi, and they've all said that the Gandhi family would remain neutral in this exercise, right? And he was kind of satisfied with that. He has a lot of support from grassroots Congress workers, and therefore he is contesting, and he has a vision to change the party and so on, right? But what happened on the last day is quite dramatic, I think. So there is no official confirmation, of course, but all sorts of media reports are suggesting that Mallikarjun Kharge is now the preferred candidate of the establishment in the Congress, i.e. the Gandhi family. And therefore, Digvijay Singh also sort of stepped aside and was one of the nominees of Mr. Kharge, who was the Rajya Sabha leader of opposition till yesterday. He is stepped down now to contest this election, and it seems he has the blessing of the Gandhis for this, which means that it is quite possible that he will win this quite handsomely. Mr. Tharoor has been saying that if you want some major changes to happen in the Congress party, then vote for him. Otherwise, like basically, Mr. Kharge is the candidate of the status quo, right? Now, I think about 9,000 plus Congress members at the state level, right, will be the electors if it actually goes down to an election later this month. If Mr. Kharge wins, he will be like the second Congress president from Karnataka and the second Dalit leader to become Congress president after Jagjeevan Ram. Mr. Kharge has had an interesting political career, right? He was twice in the running to be the Karnataka CM, but he ultimately did not get the CM post in his career. He is 80 years old. He's a very senior Congress leader, supposed to be a Gandhi family loyalist and so on. So it will be interesting if after all this, they go back to someone who is basically going to, not do much in terms of major changes. Perhaps there will be a sort of symbolism associated with having a Dalit leader as a president, which could have some political upside, but that remains to be seen. But yeah, I think after all this, probably Mr. Tharoor will have some things to complain, if at all, in private. If it turns out that it is Mr. Kharge who wins it very easily, because he got the nod from the Gandhi family.
Yeah, but where are all the young people in Congress, though? I mean, Mr.
So
Kharge
Shashi
is
Tharoor
80.
is a youth leader at 66, man. So come on.
Yeah, Mr. Tharoor is 66. Ashok Gehlot is, I think, 71. Digvijay Singh is 75,
75,
etc.
yeah.
Right, quite in contrast to the BJP, right? I mean, I think Mr. Amit Shah is around 50, late 50s, I suppose. Right. Similarly, Yogi Adityanath is early 50s. Yeah. So anyway, that is interesting. But a non-Gandhi.
Fadnavis
Sorry?
and Himanta Biswa Sarma.
Yeah, exactly.
They're all
Fadnavis
actually
and
born 1970 or 71. So all are about 50,
yeah,
51. So
yeah,
like, you got like three.
exactly.
So Fadnavis is deputy CM, but you got like three CMs or deputy CMs of big states, right? So they're all kind of in that zone. Yeah.
Yeah. But a non-Gandhi competing for the Congress president itself is, I think it's some kind of a positive change, one can say, right? So, all right, moving on to some international news. India has abstained from the UNSC resolution condemning Russia. The UN Security Council resolution was introduced by the United States and Albania, condemning Moscow's proclaimed annexation of parts of Ukraine. The resolution failed to get adopted as Russia, as expected, vetoed it. It was supported by 10 of the 15 members of the council. China, Gabon, and Brazil were the other countries that abstained. India's permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador Ruchira Kamboj, said that India was deeply disturbed by the recent turn of developments in Ukraine, and New Delhi has always advocated that no solution can ever, you can never arrive at these solutions at the cost of human lives. This is again a pretty bold move by India, right? Not buckling to the pressure from the West.
So I think, see, a lot of the Western people. So first was when Russia first attacked Ukraine. That time also India did abstain, right? But then after that, at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, in Uzbekistan, there Modi made a case for peace. He asked Putin in his public statement, he said that give peace a chance and look for a negotiated settlement, right? So what he said is India stands for peace. Three is you look at this whole UN Security Charter, UN Security Council. Russia has a veto. So no matter even if 14 countries are against Russia, Russia has a veto. So that would have been vetoed anyways. Here, what India has kind of signaled in all of these things, India does not have an ideology where it's going to stick, oh, that I'm with the West. India has its own independence, its own thought, and India has permanent interests. So India's interest is to have energy security. Right now, what is happening is India cannot afford to alienate Russia because Europe has put sanctions on Russian oil and gas, which has actually moved more to India and China, who are buying oil and gas from Middle East, so that Qatari natural gas, LNG, and UAE and Saudi crude oil is flowing towards Europe. This has higher logistics cost, higher insurance cost to the whole system, but yet the disruption isn't as bad, right? So what India has, its primary concern is its energy security. India does not have a horse in the race between Russia and Ukraine. Russia has annexed 4 states or oblasts, as they call them, in Russia and Ukraine. So Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, right? So now what has happened? This, I would say, is it's a very difficult situation for an outsider to know, because it is close parallel to Indians, I would say, is like the Tamil-speaking population in Sri Lanka, right? And they were ill-treated. So now, hypothetically, if say India had gone and annexed the Tamil part of Sri Lanka, which is LTT dominated, India hasn't done it. But I'm saying close parallel is something of that sort, where the sympathies of the people are also more towards one side than the other, right? So the referendum, a lot of people are saying it's bogus, but what was true prior to this was that you had some sort of tensions between the Russian speakers and the Ukrainian speakers. So people were ethnically Russian. A lot of those Russian ethnic people with Ukrainian passports had also applied for Russian citizenship, right? So there is a chunk which wants to be a part of Russia. I don't know whether it's a majority or no, etc. Right? So this is a delicate situation between those 2 countries, and how it is going to be solved, we don't really know. My gut feel is probably we reach some sort of a ceasefire like North Korea or South Korea, or like the Turkish Cyprus and the Greek Cyprus, you know. So we will see some sort of a stalemate, or like what is between Taiwan and China, right? So we might have that. The second thing is, after this annexation, what this does is, earlier Russia said that it was liberating, so it was attacking Ukraine as an offense and liberating these provinces from Ukrainian power, and they called it denazification. But it's not against the Jews, it's against like ethnic Russians here, and who are being ill-treated in his view. But now he says that these are part of Russia, like Crimea, which was annexed in 2014. So any attack on these parts would constitute an attack on Russia itself, which allows, as per its nuclear doctrine, to respond by nuclear weapons, right? So earlier, only if Ukraine attacked the earlier part of Russia, erstwhile Russia, right, within Russian borders, then Russia, otherwise it has a no offense policy, right, only for defense. But now they say that this is part of Russia, so now they can use it. So that is one thing. Second thing, what Russia or Putin, he gave out a speech. Now, here he is attacking the West and the ideology of the West. He is saying that the West has kind of kept these quasi allies, whom they call allies, but actually are like protectorates or in fact colonies. So he calls actually Japan and Germany as colonies of the West. And he says that Ukraine is also becoming one. And if, like, say, Ukraine was about to join NATO or was talking about joining in NATO, and he compared this with the colonization of India and Africa, or the opium trade in China, where the whole country was hooked onto drugs, and they went from having a trade surplus versus Britain to having a massive trade deficit, right? So here what he said is that Russia is just protecting its own territory, its own citizens, and he has made like a big swipe. Now, it depends on what media you read. Either it is like British media is calling it an angry taxi driver's rant against the West. Also on like other things, like issues about like the multiple genders, or like against like LGBTQ, etc. But be mindful that Russia is not talking to the West. He's not trying to convince the West about his thing. His speech is directed to his own Russian citizens, right? And he is convincing the capture or annexation of these parts of Ukraine to the Russian citizens, where he's actually asked for 300,000 or 3 lakh reservists to join the army. So they would probably provide the rear end support for the front to kind of fortify and annex these 4 provinces in Russia, right? Again, Ukraine, there are like varying things where Ukraine is also making some offensive gains, and there is a little bit of exchange of territory. It's not going smoothly in any one person's way. All media right now is biased and they're viewing it from their lens. So it's very difficult to know what is actually the truth. But this is what Putin has said, right? So he has annexed some part of Ukraine, 4 provinces. He's trying to justify his actions to Russian citizens, right? That this is the thing which he wants domestic support for it. And with this domestic support, he can get more people, more conscripts coming in. So also Russia is facing a lot of sanctions. So the local citizens would have a little more difficulty, some imported goods or some hardship. So he's trying to justify that part. India is trying to be neutral and protecting India's own interests. That India is more bothered about its own energy security rather than whether Ukraine joins the NATO or whether Russia should attack Ukraine or Crimea should be whichever part of it. So India is being more balanced towards its own interests. And see, China has done the same, right? So China is protecting its own interests. And India also has like a lot of dependency on Russia for military arms and energy. So you have to walk on a tightrope, and you've done what is best for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a very, very interesting speech, right, where he kind of, called the Western powers as being satanic, right, and hailed the traditional Russian values and everything. And he kind of made it seem like it was larger than, just a border conflict, right? I mean, it's kind of a clash of civilization, clash of values as such. There's a guy called Konstantin Kisin who runs Trigonometry, and he had put out a really good thread on this. Well, it's gone viral. It's got about 40,000 plus retweets. Do check it out. He explains parts of the speech, and it's really interesting. What I found really interesting was the reference to 1857, the opium trade and whatnot, right? I mean, so truly global in that sense. Yeah. Moving on, the central government has banned the Popular Front of India, or the PFI, under Section 3 of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967 for a period of 5 years. During the September 23rd Hartal, its activists had allegedly engaged in widespread violence, resulting in damage to buses, public property, and attacks on general public. The PFI is an Indian Muslim political organization that engages in a radical and exclusivist style of Muslim minority politics. Abhishek, I think a lot of us would feel that this was long due, right?
Yeah, I mean, so PFI is like an organization that has been around since the last decade, but its roots are basically from the erstwhile SIMI, right? Which was an organization formed in the 70s and then eventually was banned by the Indian government in 2001 initially. Then it was challenged in the courts. Briefly, the bans were withdrawn in 2008, and then finally the ban was upheld in 2008. So this SIMI obviously has a sort of storied history with, events after, the Babri Mosque incident, right? So there were bomb blasts all over India. We all know those stories. But SIMI basically, I would say, sort of splintered into two parts, right? So the really radical terror elements initially formed the Indian Mujahideen, right? So we know the sort of domestic terror activities that India faced, let's say between 2005-6 to up to 2012, 13, 14, right? And so there was obviously the Indian Mujahideen that came out of it, and then you have PFI, right? So interestingly, PFI is basically formed out of the, let's say, the merger of various different Muslim groups from various states, right? Starting off with Kerala and Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, but they've also sort of taken under its umbrella groups from all over the country. And they also have an official political arm, the political party called SDPI, right? Now, we all know that there has been a spate of violence in Kerala and parts of Karnataka, especially the coastal belt, right, where PFI has clashed repeatedly, not just with RSS and other Hindu organizations, but even CPIM, right, and also has caused a lot of concerns for the, let's say, the Christian community in Kerala, right? I think there is this famous or infamous case of the chopping of the hands of a professor in Kerala, right? Professor T.J. Joseph. So, and obviously there are like many cases of murders and rioting against PFI members, as well as, possession of illegal arms and so on. So, yeah, I think, I mean, PFI's hands were also sort of supposed to be in the major sort of anti-CA protests that happened throughout the country. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a pretty radical organization. These organizations like the PFI have sort of learned somewhat some lessons from the SIMI ban and incident, right? So you will not find the mention of the word Muslim or Islamic in any of these organizations' names, right? So, quote unquote, they sort of all profess to be secular and socialist and democratic organizations. But I mean, ultimately, the facade can only go so long. I just hope that the NIA and the police authorities have done a sort of good and comprehensive job in collection of the evidence, because obviously this will get challenged in the courts, right? And it is important that this ban is sustained, and for that you will need good strong evidence collection by the security agencies. When it comes to the reaction of various political parties, I think there was not much support for the PFI even from any of the opposition parties. But obviously, people like, let's say, RJD and others, like, they would just go on and taunt that, okay, PFI banned is great, now ban RSS and Bajrang Dal and all that, right? So that is the sort of quick, easy counter by the opposition. But none of them were like sort of stridently in defense of the PFI. I think the maximum, the person who went was Owaisi, who said that while I totally oppose PFI and its ideology, but I can't support this sort of draconian ban in totality, something like that. But even he did not really make a defense for the PFI, because I think even these organizations know that the PFI causes a lot of damage to the so-called secular parties by making things communally charged in the areas where they are sort of operating at scale, right? Which kind of benefits the BJP, but they also sort of take away votes from the so-called secular parties via their own political arm, STPI. So yeah, I don't think I mean, the PFI has too many fans outside its domain. So there is a very interesting article in the print that has come out, I think today or whatever, yesterday, by Praveen Swami. I would sort of recommend everyone to
I had
check that
almost
out.
forgotten about Praveen Swami, actually.
Yeah. So he is in the print these days. He makes nice small videos, and obviously he writes for the print now. But he makes a good point, right? He traces the whole jihadist elements of the Simi and Indian Mujahideen, PFI, etc. But he also says that basically it's like very difficult to sort of control these kind of organizations, because inevitably what happens is that there will be some sort of excesses also as part of these investigations, right? I mean, we know there were few cases where, as part of, let's say, the crackdown on Simi, some sort of innocent folks were also sort of in jail languishing for many years, and then they come out as sort of very bitter opponents of the Indian state and all that, and basically their communities also get caught up in it, and so it's like a vicious cycle, right? And that's why it's very important that uh, you know the security agencies build a very watertight and watertight case this time, so that the ban is sustained, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think PFI, SDPI, etc. I mean, these are long due banning in my estimation. I mean, we have experienced this in Bangalore, right, Abhishek? I mean, we have seen
Yeah.
the kind of like street violence that happens in the name of these so-called secular organizations as such. And so, yeah, I mean, this is a good move, and I completely understand that it's going to be like a hydra, and these folks are going to morph into, like, many other
10
organizations
different
and
other
whatnot.
organizations.
Yeah, but it's a question of making it difficult for them, right? And I think it's true. I mean, it should freeze the accounts, should definitely punish the guilty people, especially those who are calling for street violence and so on, right? So it's definitely a good move in that sense. All right, moving on to some exciting news. We had the formal launch of the 5G services. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Saturday inaugurated the 6th India Mobile Congress at Pragati Maidan in Delhi and launched 5G services. Jio and Airtel announced the launch of their 5G services in a handful of cities for now, and with further expansion planned, planned for later, and full coverage by around 2024. Cities like Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, and Gurgaon will be the first to get 5G. It is believed that the rollout of 5G will accelerate the adoption of cloud gaming, AR, VR technology, Internet of Things, and several other use cases. Nirav, this is pretty exciting, right? I mean, we've spoken earlier about the potential for 5G in India. It's great to see this roll out.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So like, I think one is that India is kind of like, if you see the lags between rest of the world and India, right, these are compressing quite a bit. Two is that both the companies which are launching these services are Indian companies, right? So earlier when we had first rollout of mobile phones, etc., you had the first the companies were was Hutchison Whampoa, right? Hutch, and you had like Orange. So those are the foreign companies getting in. So like this is like another positive. And then like lastly, with like better, we've already seen. So India internet users went from like 25 crores in 2014 to like 85 crores right now. So one is like better penetration, and two is like more reliable things, right? Also, rise in e-commerce via the ONDC platforms. So all of these things, right? This is setting up the pipes for a much bigger, brighter future. All this will also lead to like a lot of indigenization and like technology jobs for telecom equipment. And so I think the innovations, all that which can come out of it are immense, especially in the Internet of Things, IoT, right? And like a much more accurate GPS, a lot more feedback from systems, smart grids, smart refrigerators, smart TVs, which tell back that what are you watching or what point do you stop, etc. But so the collection of data, all that becomes a lot better. And as I said, the most heartening thing I felt was the companies which have started are Indian companies first, right? So that's also a good thing.
Yeah, I think that ahead of every technology curve, right? I mean, we often wonder, what more can happen. I think we already feel like we've peaked, right? But if you look at the number of devices, there's been a huge proliferation of devices. The amount of data that we're consuming, the data that we're generating every day is humongous, right? And having that sort of processing power, being able to transmit these packets of information cheaper, faster, is definitely going to flatten access, right? I mean, it's going to make it a lot more interesting for a lot of the use cases as well, whether it's healthcare or manufacturing or whatnot. We spoke about AR, VR. AR, VR has been one of those things, like, it's been like the next best thing for, it's been like, what do you call that? I mean, that transformative technology for almost 20 years, right? I mean, and it hasn't yet arrived, right? I mean, for those of us who remember the Magic Leap project or even Oculus, for example, we would have kind of expected that, this would have been front and center right now. But I think, I mean, you just heard news of Facebook, for example, investing $70 billion, right, in Meta, in the whole metaverse project and everything. So more of this stuff is going to get really relevant in our lives sooner than we think it is, right? So I could think of maybe surgeries and whatnot being performed remotely. I could think of like a lot of remote manufacturing. And so, having that basic internet infrastructure is akin to having the roadways and the highways and the logistics in the physical world, right? I mean, is absolutely akin to that. So I think I'm really excited. And to your point, Nirav, the fact that we have Indian companies, right? I mean, is a huge thing, right? I mean, if you remember, the previous bidders of the spectrum, right? I mean, it ranged from Etisalat to some of the Norwegian, Swedish, Middle Eastern firms as well, right? I mean, it's crazy, really. So yeah, I mean, this is very positive news, I would say.
Yeah, like adding one more application, like Tesla does like remote software upgrades for its cars, right? That's enabled because of like 5G. So
Right.
manufacturing equipment which gives like real-time feedback that
Yeah.
original equipment manufacturer or like cars. So that kind of data collection or like remote patches, etc. So it's just mind-boggling. The possibilities are tremendous. We don't know
Yeah.
how efficiently or how well we'll be able to use it, but it's a big leap. I don't think it's a step. It's a big leap ahead.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think, all of those possibilities that got opened up post-COVID with remote, I think we're going to see an order of magnitude more, when we have some of these things in reality, AR, VR, and so on, right? So, yeah, exciting times ahead. We just wanted to run you through a few updates on the economy front. There was some flattering news. Michael Spence, who is a Nobel laureate and professor of economics at Economics Emeritus at Stanford University, had come out with a statement that the global economy is undergoing a regime change today, and India is the outstanding performer for now, right? Which is pretty strong words. And in the same span of a few days, RBI had increased rates by 50 basis points, which is like the fourth hike in 5 months as well. So Nirav, what do you make of these things?
Yeah, so see, one thing is India has like come out of COVID totally, right? All the issues, whatever it had plagued it. So one is globally, you're seeing inflation is a big problem. There are a lot of supply chain constraints. The West had given like a huge fiscal stimulus, a huge monetary stimulus. So there's a lot of demand, which is raising the price of a lot of goods and services. So everywhere you've got to increase the cost of borrowing. So in UK, US, and in Europe, you're seeing hikes in steps of 0.75%, right? Every meeting. India, because already we were at a higher level of rates. So we've gone, repo rate has gone from 4 to 440, then 440 to like, now it's finally 590. So you have 3 hikes of half a percentage point each, right? So India is also catching up. That is a problem. My favorite, by far, the most realistic indicator is GST collections per month. We get it 30th of each month. This time again, it was 1.47 lakh crores. So which tells you, see, pre-pandemic, right? 1 lakh crore used to be a good number. Then during the pandemic, it dipped a bit, etc. But then it became 1 lakh 20 to 25,000 crores. Now we are at 1 lakh 47,000 crores. So this tells you like where our nominal GDP of the formal economy is growing. So because India is also facing a bit of inflation, so yes, some of the numbers are also due to inflated price of goods on which you pay the tax. But see, tax is actual cash paid, right, to the government. And the second thing is India, the fiscal year starts from 1st April to 31st of March. So end of September, they announce how much are they going to borrow in the next half of the calendar year. That also they've reduced it by a small amount because they're saying that, oh, we are having so much revenue, we need to borrow a little bit less. This is very rare actually. So which tells you that whatever the budgeted numbers were, we are kind of going along the budgeted numbers. This tax collection is a bit higher. Detractors of the government will say, yes, that the informal sector suffered a lot due to COVID and it's not come back up that much. I agree to it. That is a fact. There are issues where monsoons, like there's some spatial distribution difference. Some places there's a lower rice output, etc. So yes, but those are not collect. They don't pay any tax, right? Agriculture is exempt from GST. So all the other parts of the economy are doing quite well. And this number cannot be faked. It's not a survey. RBI in its policy meeting also gave projections for the rest of the year. So they believe that the whole GDP for the whole financial year will be 7%. Earlier, the projection was 7.2. But this is also very high compared to, you look at rest of the world. So I think basically, as like Michael Spence says, right, like India has done a reasonable job, gotten out of COVID. The West is struggling with the problem of high inflation. China is suffering from zero COVID and struggles to open up. So India, while it's not doing as great as we'd like it to do, relatively it's doing a lot better. So like that's all what you can say. And again, I think it's not to be too excited about one particular data point or any one thing. It's like a slow and steady journey that you keep pushing at it and keep going and keep improving from where you are to where you want to be. So yeah,
So
in that sense,
Nirav, I had a like a thought process in which or a question in which I wanted your views. So you see every major currency is weakening against the dollar considerably, right?
Yeah.
You take whether the top economies or like the euro, or you take, let's say, even our neighbors, right? How their currencies have sort of dramatically weakened against the dollar. So we are also, let's say, at all-time lows, but
Yeah.
our decline has been kind of slow, much slow. Now the RBI has been sort of doing some sort of buying, right, to protect.
Yes.
Now my question is, we have seen our reserves decline, let's say a little bit, right, over the last few
Yeah.
months. Maybe we are in the mid 500s now, right, in
Yeah.
terms
Yeah.
of our reserves.
Yeah.
Now, I think the other day there was a news that the UK itself was at just having 2 months of coverage, right, in terms of the reserves they had. So how do you see this playing out? Do you think, given the burn rate that we have in terms of our currency?
So one is okay. Maybe we went a bit too. So India was worried about inflation. We have inflation being imported quite a lot due to higher energy, crude prices, etc. So that is why RBI intervened. What they said is, you don't buy an umbrella. You buy an umbrella only so that you can use it during the rains, right? So this is what they said in the previous RBI meeting when they were told. So I think reserves went from, I think high was 642 billion sometime last year in November. So as of September, it was 537 billion. Yes, so we used that a lot. So few other data points. What do you look at is India has a goods trade deficit of about 25 to 30 billion dollars a month. So we import more goods than we export. Some of it is also our exports have fallen off due to a weaker goods demand in the West. So Europe is clearly struggling. US also, their goods demand is slowing, but the services is still strong. So that is why in Japan and Korea have gone from trade surplus to trade deficit because of this one reason. Thing number two is because of the Ukraine conflict, oil prices went up a bit, which they've come back now. Then thing number three is India has a good services export surplus. So all your TCS, Infosys, etc. So that is 10 billion a month. We have a surplus. So 25 minus 10, 15 is a shortfall, which usually foreigners would buy our equities and debt, which they've kind of stopped buying or so that is one reason why Indian currency is also weakened. But a bit of that is to be expected. I think this gradual depreciation will happen, which will allow our exports to pick up a bit. And only, I think, if and when US really does slow down or actually go into a proper recession, would this kind of affect a bit that oil prices come down and things like that. In the meanwhile, I think, as I said, India has done a reasonably good job. Could it be a lot better? Yes, but it could also be a lot worse, right? So, and nobody really has the perfect solution, perfect answers. So I think in that sense, India has been quite prudent, quite sensible. India does not have a lot of external debt. A lot of the companies, actually, India had the whole big twin balance sheet problem, excessively levered corporates, excessively levered banks with high NPAs, right after the
I think this is a good point to make, right? In the sense that our balance sheets have never been better.
Yes, exactly. Right? So we've cleaned up quite a bit. We are a lot more resilient to all these shocks. Does that mean the rupee will weaken further? I think it will, right? Yes, that will happen. But I think it's nothing which kind of creates a huge shock and panic, right? So I think that's what it is. I think RBI has used probably a bit too much firepower, right? So maybe they'll slow down a bit, but who knows? Only time will say. And maybe if FDI picks up a lot, and we're seeing a lot of announcements, but actual cash flows aren't picking up yet. If FDI picks up a lot, then I think it should be a good thing for India, right? So, yeah, that's what it is.
The other point I just wanted your views on was so there are a lot of commentators making very dire predictions for Europe now, with, let's say, the Nord Stream pipeline, which is sort of done now. They have saying it's a very bleak outlook for Europe, with obviously energy crisis, manufacturing slowdown to come in Europe. Therefore, European economy is weakening. Therefore, imports for Europe declining, which will hit exporting countries. So,
Yeah.
which economies do you think will suffer if European economy sort of tanks a bit next year?
So I think the big ones are like China, Korea, Taiwan, Japan.
Right.
So see, that's why Korea and Japan have moved from trade surplus countries to trade deficit countries. And you would expect these countries, their currencies are doing much worse than India, right? In terms of depreciation year to date. So that's a very surprising thing. So a lot of it is due to destruction of demand in Europe, right? So India is not that big an exporter, but I'm never in for like very dire predictions anywhere. I think the world's and humans always adapt. We find other ways. Maybe I think Europe will restart using coal, go for more nuclear. Things will rebalance. Already the oil trade has rebalanced, right? Marginally more Middle Eastern oil flows to Europe and Russian oil flows to India and China, right? It's like kind of like you just crisscrossed paths. So that is there. And I think people will adapt. Maybe some of the industries, if you have to make fertilizers in Europe and export to the US, and if you're importing US natural gas to make it like BASF does something of that sort. So instead of Russia, now they'll have to import natural gas from US and then export it back to US. Maybe BASF can set up factories in US. Already, German automakers are expanding their plants, like Volkswagen and like I think BMW are expanding their plants in the US to produce for the US, right? Or in Mexico. So maybe we see some sort of those rebalancing things. So yeah, I don't think it's like super dire. Hopefully things kind of sort themselves out. But yeah, India, because it exports less to Europe, does not have an FTA with Europe. India is a little bit better off. Bangladesh actually exports a lot. Compared to the US, they export a lot more to EU. So maybe Bangladesh gets hit on the lower end textiles if demand for like a few consumer goods drops.
Yeah, one of the people that I've really enjoyed following in recent times is, Professor K.V. Subramanian, who's the former chief economic advisor, and he is not holding back, right? I mean, you can see it in his threads and everything, but his ability to sort of dissect things and also explain in a very lucid manner some of these macro things, right? I mean, is phenomenal actually. So definitely check him out on Twitter. All right, so that's the end of the Bharatvaarta Weekly for this time. We have a couple of interesting episodes coming up. Obviously, there are major changes in the UK at this point of time with the Queen's passing. We have they have a new monarch, King Charles, who's taken the throne. Then a new Prime Minister as well, Liz Truss. And some trouble on the economy front as well as in terms of society as well, right? I mean, with the Hindu-Muslim riots in Leicester and whatnot. So I discussed all of this and more with Sunil Sharma, who is from the Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth. Wide-ranging discussion on all of these issues. Do check it out. And more importantly, we also spoke about how it matters from an Indian perspective, right? So that one we're going to put out perhaps on Tuesday or Wednesday of this week. Also, another interesting episode is with Hindol Sengupta, who's an author. He has this new book out, Sing, Dance and Pray, based on Srila Prabhupada, the founder of ISKCON. And ISKCON, with over 1 million plus followers. In fact, I mean, have any of you watched the documentary on him? I mean, it's pretty interesting, actually, very, very interesting. How he went to New York in the late 60s and started this movement that has gathered over 1 million followers at this point of time. So yeah, very, very interesting episodes coming up next week. Do stay tuned to us, follow us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, wherever else. And like, share all of our, like, share and subscribe. Man, 110 weeklies and I still screw up the last part of whatever I have to say, right? I mean, but anyway, you get the point. Share all of our content on social media. And from Abhishek, Neerav, and myself, thank you so much for keeping us company this week. We'll see you soon next week. Stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.